Hello!
What's going on, MDF?
Hello to viewers and listeners at home. Welcome back to Mostly Dead Folks, the history podcast about lives of the past and the way we keep them alive today. I'm your co-host, Joshua Stern.
I'm Brian Dunn.
And we are back with yet another exciting episode this week. This is going to be our last episode before summer break.
For the school year.
For the school year. It's hard to imagine. Brian, what's been a highlight this year for you?
For MDF?
There have been no highlights on MDF. It's been all
How are you
lights.
still watching?
It's been all low lights. How about beyond this illustrious podcast? Something in your personal life, academic life. What's been a highlight for you this academic year?
My students, we're going to try something new. Coming up next week, we're doing a living museum, which some schools do, based on the ancient Greek. So I'm excited for that. We'll see how they take on the role of Pericles and Socrates and Alexander the Great.
Well, if you're their teacher, I'm sure they're going to do a wonderful job.
Boy.
Already we know Brian's not only a talented educator, but easily the best rapper this school has ever seen. I think safe to say. But only when rapping about the Federalist Papers.
Yes.
That's very limited.
Yes.
You're not going to rap about
life
or music.
No.
It's just the Federalist Papers.
Just dead guys. Mostly dead folks.
This is it. It's pretty clear who came up with the name of this podcast and who does most of the legwork, obviously. We all know I'm just showing up here.
Yeah.
So today...
Well, he has his topic for today.
But
before you get started,
yes.
I just wanted to show you...
What we got?
Okay, I have the Spilling the Tea since 73 Tumblr as a little reminder as to our last episode, what should be our new birthday.
1773.
So there you go. So again, whether you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, there you go. So I specifically have my coffee in there for today.
Well, I understand. I thank you for that. And I understand the kids these days, they don't say spilling the tea. They just say tea.
The tea.
I don't even think there's a the. It's just tea.
It's just tea?
I think so. Great clip that made my old millennial behind laugh was seeing Ryan Gosling giving an interview using only Gen Z slang. It's pretty good. It's pretty good, I felt. Yeah. He looked like he was cracking up the whole time.
And he's older than us, right?
Absolutely.
He's got to be older
Absolutely.
than us,
I think he looks a heck of a lot better than we do.
He does.
It's the power of money, folks.
Yes.
The power of money.
He's not a teacher.
He's not a teacher.
Look at these faces.
This is a grind. This is what the grind looks like. Unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah.
So today, in honor of this being the last one, the last MDF podcast before the summer, we thought just to be wide open, what is the most important historical event that has happened during summer vacation? While you were away languishing, letting all of the great lessons you've learned throughout the school year just evaporate from your brain. What were some events that happened during this time in American or world history, not including the 4th of July, since we kind of covered that last week.
Yep.
I thought this was my choice of a topic, so I guess that means I go first, right?
Yeah.
So lots of dates to choose from, of course. My first thought was January 6th, 1944. Of course, Brian probably knows that one.
January 6th?
I'm sorry, June. Apologies.
I was like, January 6th. It was a lovely day.
Lovely day. Never talk about politics before the podcast begins. Sorry, June 6th, 1944. What do you got?
The D-Day invasion.
D-Day invasion. Yes. That was my initial...
It's a good one.
Well, that was my initial thought.
Oh, you didn't go with it?
I didn't go with that route.
Okay.
Only because as important and substantial and massive as June 6, 1944 was in the end of World War II, I think historically speaking, if that event doesn't happen, eventually the Russians are going to win the war anyway.
You think?
If you look at the numbers, they lose 18 million people in the war. And if you look at the maps, they're pressing hard on Germany's eastern flank. Certainly, D-Day expedites the end of the war.
Stalin wanted that Western Front.
Which is why it's an incredibly vital moment, but I think it's less vital in the context of World War II and more vital in the post-war context. Nonetheless, super important date. Maybe a date, though, that gets a lot of acclaim. Saving Private Ryan, obviously, the first 20 minutes of that movie really vividly brought to life this in battle. And of course, D-Day is very important. But I went with a date that I think is lesser known. Some would even say forgotten. I went with June 25th, 1950, the beginning of the Korean War. So for the Forgotten War, exactly right. So I figure, why not? If this war is forgotten, let's give it a little bit of time and life here on Mostly Dead Folks. So on June 25th, 1950, North Korean troops, millions of them pour across the then relatively unguarded border between North Korea and South Korea. They capture Seoul, the capital, within 2 days, and they've conquered most of South Korea by the end of the summer. The only holdout is this little tiny portion called the Daegu perimeter, named after the city of Daegu, in that portion of the country, literally holding on to this tiny sliver of nominal democracy. Now, I'm not going to say that what was happening in South Korea was a model of a democratic sort of country, but certainly superior to the kind of North Korean communist regime led by Kim Il-sung. It's looking bad, folks. It's looking real bad on that date and throughout the summer. Thankfully, General MacArthur, a guy who gets a rightful amount, I think, of criticism and stick for his role in the Pacific Theater and Japan. Correct. Having said that, his landing at Incheon, which you should look up, now that is a landing that is akin to the difficulty and indeed significance of D-Day, because he lands in Incheon, which I'm biased here. I lived in Korea for a year. I lived in Incheon, so I learned a lot about the history there. This very brave, aquatic, amphibious landing on Incheon. It could have gone terribly wrong, but it's a glowing success. Turns the tide of the war, and the South Koreans, with the help, I think this is maybe lesser known to our audience, it wasn't just the United States and South Korea, as you know. This is the first time the United Nations comes together and sends a multinational force to defend a democracy against communism. It's the first time that this idea of the Truman Doctrine, that America will now defend democracy around the world, it's the first time that that is threatened militarily. And the reason this war is considered kind of forgotten is most Americans were still getting over World War II. We wanted to hang out in suburbia, grill, go to church, have children. War was the furthest thing from people's minds. Having said that, for the guys on the ground, there's nothing forgotten about this war to them. I recommend highly a book by a guy named Hampton Sides, his book On Desperate Ground. It focuses on one battle, the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. I don't know if you're familiar. It's been called Frozen Chosin because temperatures got as low as minus 30 degrees. And you had this small battalion of Marines who were really abandoned by MacArthur, by the way, and really sent on sort of a wild goose chase into a very isolated portion of what is now North Korea, where they are surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops who have been able to advance in secret by tying themselves to trees so American surveillance planes won't see them and they can sleep during the day. So they literally tied themselves to trees so they can sleep, and they move entirely at night. The American Marines are aware that there's a presence. They have no idea of the scale, and it's only through sheer bravery, heroism, and determination to fight for the guy next to them that a detachment of literally a couple hundred Marines hold off wave after wave after wave of Chinese, essentially kamikaze attacks on their lines. Eventually, the Marines pull out, which leads to this incredible quote, which is associated with Major General Oliver Smith, where he says, "The Marines are not retreating. We are advancing in a different direction."
I love it.
Which is great. And I mean, that seems like a bit of, CYA language there. But truthfully, by advancing away from the front, they were able to break through the perimeter. And even though they sustained heavy losses, they are able to evacuate those remaining Marines from the Chosin Reservoir. This war, to me, is forgotten because, it's sandwiched between Vietnam and World War II, but it's a tremendously important conflict because, A, it helps inspire later generations to go to war in Vietnam. Not that that was a good thing, but certainly a significant moment, because they could point to Korea as a moment where communism was contained. It wasn't defeated, but it was contained at the 38th parallel where the war began. So American generals could say, look, we did this here. We can surely do this again in Vietnam. Obviously, a catastrophe. If you visit Korea, highly recommend visiting South Korea, not just for the K-pop, but the food is great, the people are great, noraebang, which is Korean karaoke, very, very popular. And the only reason why South Korea is able to not be this desperately poor nation the way North Korea is because of the brave actions of the United Nations and South Korean soldiers really fighting for the future of their country.
Yeah.
And now you have the world's least internet-connected community next to the most, the world's poorest economy next to one of the biggest. It's, and I tell my students, life, a lot of it's luck. A lot of people started on the South Korean side, and they ended up on the North Korean side. And how different generations are impacted by this war. So I go June 25th, 1950.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thank you.
There's a lot to unpack. So let me just piggyback off of what you said.
Sure.
So you mentioned the Truman Doctrine and containment. Truman really kind of felt the pressure that, because again, before Korea, you have China. And China was, even before World War II, there was a civil war going on. And so that was Truman's thing, because he got criticized, like, hey, buddy, China just fell, so much for your containment plan. And he had to backpedal and say, well, China was already a lost cause.
Right.
But I can't let somebody else fall.
And if we want to, the domino theory, as it's later called.
Right, and then with MacArthur pushing further and further, because he was super
he was all in,
going all the way
up,
and basically freeing the whole peninsula. And then that's when he sees Chinese soldiers, and that's when Truman's like, okay, now I don't want a war with China. And so we've got it. And so he famously recalls MacArthur, and that was a big controversial moment. And again, at that time, because a lot of people lose sight of this, Truman was heavily unpopular when he was president.
Absolutely.
Again, big shoes to fill with FDR.
Sure.
And then you have the Korean War and the early days of the Cold War. And again, when you make a controversial thing like this war hero MacArthur being fired, essentially.
Sure. Like an unpopular president.
Right. And so, but again, I like Truman because, and Truman has risen through the ranks in terms of popular presidents now.
I think
because now, again, the thing is, with history, we reevaluate things and that.
Like how people used to think FDR was great, but now we know he was overrated.
He was overrated.
Incorrect.
He was overrated.
Factually incorrect.
Anyway.
But I'm sorry, just one side note about Korean War. Also, you mentioned Truman. He becomes the president who desegregates the military. And that's the first time since the War of 1812 that black and white American soldiers serve side by side.
So many accomplishments that we need to recognize with Truman. I'll just say this, because when you were telling your story, I had such a vision of, it's my favorite memorial in D.C., and that's the Korean War Memorial.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The symbolism and the amount of thought that was put into it.
And it's going over a big rehaul, though, or overhaul, or redo. I think they're redoing not the main area with the statues, but the fountain area. I think they're expanding that out.
Oh, okay.
I think they're actually adding a wall of names, which I don't love, because then it's too much like Vietnam in my view.
Well, they already have that with
wall
like the
of faces.
nurses.
Yeah.
They have that with the nurses and stuff. And then also the wall reflects the 19 soldiers. So when you do 19 plus 19 is 38, so there's the parallel line. So again, that's what I love. But.
And actually, when you go to Korea today, there's memorials all across the country that are devoted to or dedicated to the different contingents of soldiers. So there's an area called Chuncheon, which is in this river valley, and there's a famous battle there, and the majority of the soldiers were Ethiopian. It's like 300 soldiers from Ethiopia die in this conflict. And there's this really incredible memorial that's shaped like a traditional Ethiopian home that's done. So all across the country you find, and they're not small, these are like large memorials. So the South Koreans really, I think, still to this day show quite a great debt of gratitude, though that's shifting with modern times too.
Right. Well, I mean, they are still a solid ally.
Absolutely.
I think, Japan and South Korea are probably our top allies in the region.
And probably the Philippines as well.
And the Philippines, So
what do you got?
So I went American. Sorry, I always tend to go American.
We have that background. Love your bias.
May 10th, 1869. And again, this is where you criticize me, because I know May is like for teachers, May is pretty much summertime, the start of summertime for us.
I'll give you that.
But why I say I wanted to go with this is because, and this might clue you in as to what this is.
I know.
You think you know it? Oh, you started to go
I think I know.
Okay. is because this project is going to go not only under budget, which was an accomplishment, but ahead of schedule, because it was originally supposed to be finished later in the summer. So this is why I kind of went with it.
I'm good with it. I'm good with it.
And so he knows where I'm going with this. This is the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. So just a couple things I wanted to highlight. So this originally got started with the Pacific Railroad Act of 1862. And again, this is right in the heart of the Civil War. So, and that plays into this story. You have Congress authorizing acres of land out west and government bonds for every mile of track that these two competing railroad companies, you have the Union Pacific that was going to be coming from Omaha, Nebraska, and then the Central Pacific, which was coming from Sacramento. And so these two are just racing with each other to see how much money can we make in laying down track, with the obvious point of eventually meeting. This is a huge moment because, again, travel across the country, if you were going from one coast to the other, it would take at least, I would say, a month, a solid month, because you're doing stagecoach, you're hopping on and off trains, horseback.
We grew up with the Oregon Trail. We know about dying of
dysentery and fording the river.
Yeah, God.
Yes.
I always died fording the river.
I died the second I left. What was it, Independence, Missouri or whatever? Like you leave and it's like, Timmy just died. Oh, you died. And it's like, the wheel just started turning. Anyway, this is going to shorten travel across the continent to just 7 days, about 7 to 10 days, which is a great accomplishment. This is also going to make things cheaper. So to get from New York to San Francisco after this railroad is completed is only going to be about $65 back then, which was, again,
a couple
saving
hundred
money.
adjusting for inflation.
Yeah, saving a good chunk of money. So Central Pacific, they are going to be largely... the workers are going to be Chinese immigrants who were largely pulled in from the California gold rush and then looking for work. And hey, look, here's an opportunity. Now, they had the hardest time because they literally have to go through the Sierra Nevadas, the rocky, hilly terrain. They're literally blasting tunnels and that sort of thing. The Union Pacific coming from Nebraska, pretty flat plains and prairies, but they also do have to deal with like the Apaches and Native Americans that were again trying to halt the white man's advance. Now the Union Pacific, they're largely going to be supplied by the Irish, the Germans, the Italians, and then Civil War vets, because again, this is going to be completed on 1869 in Promontory Point, Utah. And when this was completed, a telegraph was sent to both coasts, one of them being directly to President Grant at the time. And it is going to basically say one word. Do you know what that word was?
Success.
That's a good one. Done. Done. That was it. Done. That was the message. Nothing else had to be said. Everybody understood. Done. Oh my gosh, the rails have now connected.
Done.
Now, if you're curious, the Union Pacific had an easier time at this, and so they laid more track. I had the amount. So they laid over 1,000 rails. Miles of rails, whereas the Central Pacific only 690 because, again, they had a harder time. Now, I love this part of the story. So now you're going to have a big ceremony, right? And so you had representatives from both railroads coming together, and they're going to drive a golden spike. This was a 17-karat gold spike. Do you know who was one of the guys that attempted to do this?
I think I've heard this. Tell me.
Leland Stanford of Stanford University, right? Yeah. And so he goes to drive it in and he totally misses and hits the tie instead of the spike. Next comes a representative from the Union Pacific, and this is a Thomas Durant. And Durant was a little excited the night before that they had completed this great achievement. So he was, enjoying himself. He was hungover. And so when he went, he also totally missed and just made a fool of himself. So eventually one of the professional railroad workers has to step in and drive it in. Now again, you're not going to leave a solid gold spike in the ground. So immediately after they did that, they immediately take it out and drive in a regular spike. Now, the saddest part of this story, besides the fact that, yes, people died in this construction, especially the Chinese, on that note, a very famous, one of the most famous photos. I'm sure you've seen it, where you have the two trains kind of almost kissing, and then everybody's like on the trains and waving and posing. If you look at that picture, there is one group that's not represented, and that's the Chinese.
No Chinese.
Literally, they were starting to pose, and literally they were brushing them off, saying, "No, get out of the frame." And so that's kind of the sad thing, because they had such a major role.
Sure.
And I just kind of wanted to recognize that in terms of uniting this country, in terms of coast to coast, further Western expansion, making even just the post office be more successful in terms of delivering the mail,
which they're great at today. My mail always.
Well, it's a government.
I would also note, the ultimate kind of cherry on top for the Chinese is immediately after finishing it, they're subject to the head tax. Where now, if you want to stay in America, bring someone over, it's going to cost you $500 in 1869 for you and each one of your family members. And that didn't stop Chinese workers from finding the money. Right. So then in 1882 or 1883, the Chinese Exclusion Act. Chinese Exclusion Act. Yes. You know what? We're done. No Chinese people coming in, which is why today Mexico actually still has a massive Chinese population, because many Chinese immigrants went to Mexico initially to come into the United States and decided, you know what? Let's just stay here in Mexico.
So, and again, the sad thing is they were often blamed for problems in the country. Who's the easiest target to blame at that time? Just go with the Chinese. Now, again, they're not the only immigrant group that, as our history has shown, the Irish had Nina with no Irish need apply and struggling to get work.
The Chinese are the only group to have an actual law levied specifically against them. The Irish persecution was more on the ground level. There was never a law.
Yeah, it was a nativist movement, anti-Catholic, anti-Rome, Pope, that kind of thing.
None of my students, I kind of took for granted this idea that of course Catholics have faced persecution in this country. Thankfully, none of my students really understand that. I always need to kind of explain, historically Americans thought that you couldn't have a Catholic president because he'd be loyal to the Vatican. Right. That's just such a foreign concept.
And that goes all the way to John Kennedy.
Of course.
Like 1960, we were still worried about this.
Exactly. So I think it's a good thing that the kids today don't have a connection to that, but it's an important part of our history.
Oh, it can't be ignored. So that's what I got.
I like it.
I like yours too, man.
Great choice.
That's awesome.
Great choice.
We're rocking this.
We're going for it. This is not, I don't think this has been a disaster yet. That may change for the final question. This is from the upper school. This is from Nathan, who asked the question of, and this is similar to what I had argued with the Korean War, who is the best military strategist or general in world history of all time?
Oh, man.
Who you got?
I think I might have, kicked around this name before. Alexander the Great is pretty incredible.
He's great.
And I mean, if you don't know, he never lost a battle. I believe that what does him in, so to speak, is malaria, because he dies mysteriously. We still don't know, because again, he invades India, and then he dies of a high fever. Some even say that he dropped into a coma, wasn't even dead, and they might have buried him alive. There's all these theories. Jeez. I don't know. Anyway, but long story short, in terms of battlefield expertise. One battle is when he is in India, just crossing over into India. He had to kind of cross over a river with the enemy waiting for him. And one of the things that he did strategy-wise, because that's what you're asking, is
it was best military strategist.
Okay, strategist,
strategy.
So I'm thinking again, you're against the odds, you have lower numbers, you don't have the home field advantage, and so he knows all this. So how do I, overcome this enemy? Well, one of the things he did real quick was he had his men march back and forth, and so the enemy followed them. Okay, are they going to attack at any point? And that wore out the enemy psychologically. They're like, when is this attack happening? When is this attack happening? Finally, when he launched his invasion, he had a body double pretend that he was him.
Really?
He had his guards guard his war tent, which showed to the enemy, Alexander's still there. He's still there. He's still camped. He had part of his army still resume activity, good campfires and whatnot. Meanwhile, he takes part of his army, crosses that river, and then leads to this major attack. he goes up against war elephants, famously, and he's like, okay, how do I deal with this? Because my men are frightened by these beasts. And so one of the things is he really disrupts the elephants, like scares them, confuses them to the point that they're throwing their own riders, stomping on their own men. So that's just some of the things. I mean, I could talk about Hannibal Barca, also with the Romans. I mean, because I'm with ancient history, I go way back. I like it when you put a little thought into it.
Sure.
Washington also has his moments during the Revolution in terms of surviving.
Yeah.
But who do you got?
This was a tough question to me. I'm not a military historian. I mean, I think the easy answer from an American's perspective is, of course, Washington. Great. Grant, also great. I was choosing between two. From an American point of view, it's probably not the right answer. The right answer is probably either Eisenhower or Patton. Probably the right answer, but I'm going to give Grant a shout out here for the work he does at Vicksburg, and the importance of winning Vicksburg on the 4th of July during the Civil War. And I think the way in which Vicksburg was seen as kind of this unconquerable city, sort of the jewel of the Mississippi.
Do you know his strategy at Vicksburg? What he did?
Go ahead. Tell me.
You sure? I don't want to trample you.
Take the ball.
Because I love military history.
Go ahead.
I love all the strategy.
Brian knows a lot more.
Instead of just bulldozing full, because they just they're
loaded up on a hill.
Yeah, it's up on a hill. He needs this for control of the Mississippi River.
Sure.
And this happens right at the time of Gettysburg. And so what he does is, instead of directly attacking where he knows they're bunkered in, he goes on a roundabout series, almost like a fish hook.
Yeah.
And he just draws them out to come, teasing them out to fight him, little so that when he completes that fish hook, Vicksburg is now loosely defended.
Toast.
And then the siege, of course, happens and everything like that. So
that's quite all right.
I love that strategy. Grant's great.
I went with Grant. I was going to go with Sherman, but I also know our audience, and I don't know if that name goes over very well here in the South. So just for sake of argument, I'm going to go Grant and give him his due. And I think Grant's really underrated in a lot of ways.
Even his strategy at Shiloh was amazing, because he gets whooped the first day of Shiloh, and Sherman even comes to him and is like, "Well, heck of a day, Grant." And he's like, "Yep. But we'll lick him tomorrow." What he says as he just calmly smoked his cigar, and sure enough.
Got to give Robert E. Lee his due, but I think Pickett's charge and the failure at
Gettysburg was a big
black mark against them. Yeah. But he also didn't have the men or the money that the Union had as well. So, honorable mention to Lee as the general.
I like it.
That's all we got today for this episode of, I would say, mostly successful episode.
Mostly successful.
Mostly dead folks. Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to take a little pause for the summer, but keep an eye out for shorts. Brian's going to be doing some traveling to some historic sites this year. I will as well. So be on the lookout for our always handsome, not quite Ryan Gosling handsome, but our always handsome faces populating your internet screen. We hope you've enjoyed this year, and we're looking forward to another year with you all. So on behalf of myself, Joshua Stern.
Brian Dunn.
Yeah, I should have said on behalf of Brian Dunn. But I'm Joshua Stern. He's Brian Dunn.
There you go.
Thank you for listening and watching Mostly Dead Folks. Please subscribe and give your feedback, and we will see you all in the new academic year. Take care.
Take care.